Welcome to This Explainer. I'm super excited you're joining us today because we're about to unpack one of the most fascinating and honestly most urgent challenges in modern product development. I want you to picture your product team on a typical Monday morning in early 2026. The designer has Figma fired up, the engineers have their environments running, and the product manager, well, they open up their shiny new AI tool, type in a quick prompt, and literally within minutes they've generated dozens of perfectly written user stories, fully mapped to quarterly goals, just ready to drop straight into the backlog. I mean, it feels effortless, right? But then, 3 months later, the feature actually ships, and usage sits at an abysmal 4%. You've just churned out beautifully crafted yet completely useless features. So what's going on here? Today, we're going to look at the data to understand exactly why this is happening.
To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at the very first piece of our paradox. According to a late 2025 survey by Productboard, this was of almost 380 product professionals, 100% of product teams are using AI tools. I just want you to let that sink in for a second. 100%? It's total saturation. Every single team, from those scrappy little startups all the way up to massive Fortune 500 companies, they've all adopted AI to help drive their product management.
But here's where things get wild. McKinsey drops their State of Organizations 2026 report, and it shows that while adoption is sitting at 100%, an astonishing 94% of companies report getting absolutely no significant value from their AI investments. None. So we've got this universal adoption happening right alongside a near-universal failure to actually get tangible value from that exact same tech.
I mean, it sounds totally impossible, right? How on earth can both of these numbers be true at the exact same time? Well, think of this as a bit of a mystery, and we're going to solve it together right now. You know, conventional wisdom usually tells us that if your outcomes aren't improving, you just need better tools, or maybe smarter prompts, or a tighter feedback loop. But the data proves that this isn't a tool problem at all, not even close. Instead, it points to a fundamental, widespread misunderstanding of what AI can actually do in the product lifecycle.
Okay, so let's jump back a bit and trace where this whole myth actually began. If we look at the rapid evolution of these tools, back in 2023, the first generation of AI-assisted research tools, think Dovetail and Notion AI, they showed some genuine massive efficiency gains. You could take 50 interview transcripts and synthesize all the themes in hours instead of days. It was a game changer. By 2024, the big analysts definitely took notice, making these capabilities a primary way they evaluated tools. And by 2025, well, basically every single PM tool in the market had this built right in. Now, because those early time savings were so real and so impressive, analysts and thought leaders started throwing around a new, incredibly catchy term, AI-powered discovery. And honestly, this specific phrase tricked teams into believing that the entire discovery process, the actual human act of figuring out what problems need solving, had been completely automated. The tools were selling like crazy, the demos looked like absolute magic, and nobody really stopped to look closely at what the word discovery actually means.
So, moving on to the forensic evidence, let's see how this builds into what we're calling the Productboard-McKinsey paradox. When you've got skyrocketing adoption on one hand and incredibly low value on the other, you really shouldn't view them as contradictory. They're actually convergent data points. They're pointing directly at a singular structural flaw in how modern product teams are working today. It's basically telling us that teams are super active, but they are aiming all of that energy in completely the wrong direction. If we look back at the most common use cases from that Productboard survey, we get a clear picture of what teams are actually using AI for. They're writing user stories, synthesizing customer feedback, generating roadmap rationale, and creating PRDs. And hey, let's be fair, AI is flawlessly executing these tasks every single day. It does this work seamlessly. But look closely at that list for a sec. These are all execution tasks. Actually, scratch that. They're processing tasks. They all completely rely on information you already have.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is a distinction that was astutely highlighted by a Dovetail researcher back in 2025. AI is purely a synthesis engine. That's it. It requires a corpus of input. Synthesis asks, what patterns exist in this data? Discovery, on the other hand, asks a much harder question. What data should I be collecting in the first place? AI simply cannot operate as a discovery engine because it has absolutely no way of telling you which conversations you haven't had yet.
The APMIC survey of 2026 backs this up beautifully. It shows that 54% of a product manager's administrative time has been successfully automated, which is a massive time saver. But, and it's a big but, the crucial human judgment tasks, like actively choosing who to talk to, figuring out what specific questions to ask them, and knowing how to interpret their silence, those remain completely untouched by AI. Basically, AI is doing the heavy lifting on the paperwork, but it's doing absolutely zero to help you figure out if you're building the right thing.
And this brings us to a very specific culprit identified by the Process Excellence Network in March 2026. They called it signal concentration bias. Because teams are just feeding massive amounts of easy-to-gather digital data straight into their AI tools, they start over-indexing on feedback from their most vocal customer segments. Why? Well, because those are the people generating the most digitized signal. This bias perfectly explains why product teams are so efficiently solving the completely wrong problems.
Think about how this ecosystem operates in the real world. AI fundamentally acts as a pattern recognition system, right? So it only processes the voices of those who actually speak up. You've got your power users and your complainers constantly generating a mountain of support tickets and survey responses. But what about the other side of the equation? What about the silent churners, or the prospects who looked around and never converted? They leave no digital footprint because they generate no data. They are entirely 100% unrepresented in your AI synthesis.
Now here is the absolute smoking gun. An MIT study of over 700 software teams found that the teams using AI to assist in requirements generation shipped 23% more features per quarter. I mean, they are moving incredibly fast. But take a look at the user satisfaction metric. It's completely flat. And honestly, in some highly AI-adopted teams, it actually showed a slight decline. They're just creating this massive feature load without any actual gain in utility for the user.
We can define this dangerous little phenomenon as the problem discovery gap. This is that growing dangerous distance between what AI helps you rapidly synthesize and what you actually needed to uncover to build a truly successful product. When synthesis gets this effortless, teams naturally just do more of it. They feed more data in, they get more output, and gradually, the uncomfortable but absolutely necessary act of going out into the real world to find new, surprising signals, it just starts to feel completely unnecessary.
All right, so how do we actually fix this? The structural resolution for product teams is honestly pretty straightforward. You just need to consciously separate your work into two distinct modes. First up is synthesis mode. Use AI aggressively here. Feed in everything, let it process that high volume of data super fast, and let AI do what it does best. But you absolutely must separate this from discovery mode. Discovery mode has to be analog, deeply human, and focused entirely on seeking out those uncomfortably silent signals.
When you are in discovery mode, you have to engage in very specific, irreplaceable human actions. Step 1. You actively go talk to that customer who churned silently. Step 2. Get on a call and interview the prospect who looked at your pricing page but didn't convert. Step 3. Actually sit down and observe an uncoached, first-time user awkwardly struggling with your product. You literally have to seek out the crucial signal that AI cannot manufacture for you simply because that data just hasn't been collected yet.
I want to end this explainer with a pretty provocative question, one that I really hope challenges your current workflow. Right before your very next sprint planning session, don't just ask if you have enough feedback synthesized. You need to ask yourself, does the feedback I've synthesized actually represent the full range of reality, including these silent parts? AI is absolutely amazing at answering the questions you ask it, but your irreplaceable job as a human is making sure you're asking the right questions in the very first place. Give that some thought, and I will catch you in the next explainer.